Your soulmate's prayer reached heaven. God's answer is now unfolding. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this fictional story begins during one of the quietest nights imaginable, when the world seemed asleep but one heart remained wide awake. Stay until the very end, because what you are about to hear is not a prediction about your life, your future, or another person's. It is an inspirational story about faith, hope, perseverance, and the quiet ways people can be transformed when they choose honesty, compassion, and trust instead of fear. The night was calm as countless stars stretched across the sky like tiny lights scattered over a peaceful horizon. The streets had grown silent, homes were dark, and even the wind seemed to whisper gently through the trees. In one small room, however, someone remained awake long after midnight. Their heart carried questions that had no easy answers. They had spent months wondering whether every difficult season had any purpose, whether every delay carried meaning, and whether the lessons learned through disappointment would one day reveal something beautiful. Rather than allowing uncertainty to become bitterness, they quietly bowed their head and offered a simple prayer. Not demanding a particular outcome, but asking for wisdom, courage, and the strength to become a kinder person regardless of what tomorrow might bring. As the quiet hours slowly passed, they reflected on every chapter of their life. They remembered conversations that had ended too soon, opportunities they wished they had handled differently, and moments when fear had spoken louder than hope. Yet they also remembered unexpected acts of kindness, strangers who had encouraged them during difficult seasons, family members whose patience had carried them through hardship, and friends who had remained faithful when life felt uncertain. Looking back, they realized that every season had quietly shaped their character. In this fictional story, what they experienced as God's answer was not a sudden promise that every wish would immediately come true. It was the quiet realization that they had never truly been walking alone. Every challenge had been teaching resilience. Every disappointment had been encouraging humility. Every unanswered question had been inviting deeper trust. My beloved child, don't skip this part, because the emotional heart of this fictional story begins here. The following morning, they woke with an unfamiliar sense of peace. Their circumstances had not suddenly changed. The world around them looked exactly the same. Yet something inside felt different. Instead of beginning the day with anxiety, they greeted the sunrise with gratitude. They decided to spend the morning serving others rather than worrying about problems they could not control. They visited an elderly neighbor, helped prepare meals at a community center, encouraged a discouraged friend, and thanked the people who had quietly supported them throughout the years. By the time evening arrived, they realized that their prayer had already begun changing the one heart they could truly influence, their own. Meanwhile, somewhere else in this fictional story, another person was experiencing a season of reflection. They too had spent many evenings wondering how life had led them to this point. Rather than dwelling upon old disappointments, they began asking themselves different questions. How can I become more patient? How can I forgive more freely? How can I encourage the people around me? Day after day, those questions slowly reshaped their priorities. They discovered that lasting peace grows where kindness is consistently practiced and that genuine relationships are strengthened not through dramatic promises but through faithful daily choices. Weeks later, both happened to volunteer at the same neighborhood event supporting local families in need. They worked side by side without expecting anything extraordinary. Throughout the afternoon they packed food boxes, greeted visitors with warm smiles, and encouraged children participating in community activities. Watching one another quietly serve without seeking recognition left a lasting impression. There were no dramatic speeches or impossible coincidences. There was simply the quiet beauty of witnessing someone whose life reflected humility, generosity, and sincere compassion. In this fictional story, what they experienced as God's answer unfolded through ordinary opportunities to grow in character, deepen friendships, and serve others with faithful hearts. Listen carefully, my beloved child, because this fictional story now shares one of its deepest lessons. Sometimes the answer to a heartfelt prayer is not the immediate arrival of everything we hope for. Sometimes the answer is the slow transformation that prepares us to receive whatever tomorrow may hold with wisdom, gratitude, and integrity. Hope grows stronger when we continue doing good even during uncertain seasons. Faith deepens whenever we choose trust instead of despair. Love becomes lasting whenever it is expressed through patience, respect, honesty, and compassion. As another sunrise painted the horizon with warm shades of gold and blue, both welcomed the new day carrying grateful hearts. They no longer measured life only by unanswered questions. Instead, they measured it by the person they were becoming. Every act of kindness strengthened hope. Every word of encouragement built trust. Every ordinary day became another opportunity to reflect the values they had been quietly learning all along. My beloved child, don't skip these closing words, because the next chapter of this fictional journey will reveal how one simple conversation begins opening doors neither person expected, reminding us that some of life's most meaningful answers unfold gradually through faithful choices, humble hearts, enduring hope, and lives devoted to truth, compassion, and love. My beloved child, don't skip this chapter, because in this fictional story, the answer that first began as quiet peace inside one heart is now slowly becoming visible through everyday life. Listen carefully, because the most meaningful changes rarely arrive all at once. They unfold one faithful step at a time, one act of kindness at a time, and one courageous decision at a time. This is not a prediction about your life or your future. It is a fictional story about faith, perseverance, gratitude, and discovering that the greatest answers often begin by transforming the person who offered the prayer. Several weeks passed after that peaceful morning, and life continued with its familiar routines. The sun still rose each day, families gathered around dinner tables, neighbors greeted one another with warm smiles, and children filled the streets with joyful laughter. At first glance, nothing extraordinary seemed to have happened. Yet beneath those ordinary moments, quiet change was taking place. The person who had once carried endless worry now found themselves responding differently to life's challenges. Instead of becoming discouraged by delays, they chose patience. Instead of reacting with frustration, they listened with understanding. Instead of allowing fear to shape every decision, they quietly asked themselves how they could become a blessing to someone else before the day ended. Looking back, they realized their prayer had already begun producing fruit, not by changing the world overnight, but by changing the heart with which they faced the world. One afternoon, while helping organize a neighborhood food drive, they met people from many different backgrounds. Some had experienced loss. Others carried heavy responsibilities. Some smiled despite difficult circumstances, while others quietly struggled beneath burdens few people noticed. Rather than focusing only upon their own unanswered questions, they began encouraging everyone they met. A gentle conversation lifted someone's spirits. A warm smile comforted another. A simple act of service reminded a family that they had not been forgotten. In this fictional story, what they experienced as God's answer was not found in spectacular signs. It unfolded through opportunities to become more compassionate, more generous, and more willing to love without expecting anything in return. My beloved child, don't skip this part, because the emotional heart of this fictional story begins here. On that same afternoon, another volunteer quietly joined the event. Neither expected anything unusual from the day ahead. They simply wanted to serve. As they worked side by side, loading supplies, greeting visitors, and helping children carry small boxes to waiting families, they noticed something beautiful about one another. Neither tried to attract attention. Neither sought praise. They simply continued serving faithfully with quiet joy. By the end of the afternoon, both realized that genuine peace is often recognized not through impressive words but through consistent acts of kindness. Their conversation remained simple, filled with gratitude for family, appreciation for community, and hope that every small effort might brighten someone else's day. As evening settled across the town, they sat together beneath the soft glow of lanterns after the volunteers had finished cleaning up. The conversation turned toward the lessons life had taught them. One admitted, "There was a time when I prayed mostly for circumstances to change." The other smiled gently before replying, "I discovered that my greatest prayer became asking for the wisdom to become the kind of person who could face any circumstance with faith and compassion." Those words remained in the quiet evening air. They realized that while circumstances eventually change, character continues shaping every season of life. That understanding brought a peace far deeper than either had expected. The following days brought new opportunities to live according to those lessons. Family relationships grew stronger because conversations became more honest. Friendships deepened because trust was built through consistent kindness. Community projects flourished because people served together with grateful hearts instead of competing for recognition. Looking around, they recognized that one transformed heart quietly influences many others. Every act of humility encourages humility. Every expression of forgiveness inspires forgiveness. Every decision to remain hopeful becomes an invitation for someone else to hope again. Listen carefully, my beloved child, because this fictional story now shares one of its deepest truths. In this story, what they experienced as God's answer reminded them that prayers are often answered in ways that first transform the person who prays. A patient heart begins noticing opportunities that impatience once overlooked. A grateful spirit recognizes blessings hidden within ordinary days. A compassionate life becomes a source of encouragement for countless people whose names may never even be known. Those quiet changes become the foundation upon which healthier relationships, stronger families, and more peaceful communities are built. As dawn slowly painted the horizon with beautiful shades of gold and blue, both stepped into another new day carrying joyful hearts. They no longer searched for dramatic signs before choosing hope. They simply embraced each sunrise as another opportunity to serve faithfully, speak honestly, forgive generously, and love with humility. They trusted that every ordinary act of goodness mattered, even when its full impact remained unseen. My beloved child, don't skip these closing words, because the next chapter of this fictional journey will reveal how one heartfelt family gathering helps both people recognize that the answer they had been waiting for was unfolding quietly all along, not through extraordinary events alone, but through transformed hearts, faithful choices, enduring hope, and lives devoted to truth, kindness, and compassion. My beloved child, don't skip this chapter, because in this fictional story, the quiet answer that first began inside one heart is now becoming visible in the lives of many people. Listen carefully, because the greatest blessings often unfold gradually. They are rarely recognized in a single moment. Instead, they are discovered through countless ordinary days where people choose patience instead of frustration, forgiveness instead of resentment, and hope instead of despair. This is not a prediction about your life or your future. It is a fictional story about faith, perseverance, compassion, and learning that true transformation begins within. As another season quietly arrived, the town prepared for its annual gathering of families and neighbors. Volunteers decorated the community hall with simple flowers, children practiced songs they would perform later that evening, and elderly guests shared stories that had been passed from one generation to the next. The atmosphere was peaceful, not because everyone's lives had become free from difficulty, but because people had learned the importance of walking through difficult seasons together. Looking around, the person who had once prayed through long nights of uncertainty realized something remarkable. The answer they had hoped for had never been limited to one event. It had quietly unfolded through every lesson, every friendship, and every opportunity to become a kinder person. Throughout the afternoon, many conversations filled the hall with warmth. Families expressed gratitude for neighbors who had offered encouragement during difficult times. Friends remembered quiet acts of generosity that had restored hope when life felt overwhelming. One elderly woman smiled while recalling how a simple visit from a caring volunteer had lifted her spirits after months of loneliness. A young father shared how one encouraging conversation had inspired him to rebuild trust within his own family. Listening to those stories, everyone realized that kindness often creates ripples reaching far beyond the moment in which it is offered. In this fictional story, what they experienced as God's answer was not granting instant certainty about tomorrow. It was gently teaching them that faithful love, humble service, and consistent compassion quietly shape futures more beautiful than anyone can fully imagine. My beloved child, don't skip this part, because the emotional heart of this fictional story begins here. As evening approached, the celebration moved outdoors beneath a sky glowing with shades of gold, crimson, and soft blue. Lanterns illuminated the pathways while children laughed together across the open field. During the gathering, one respected elder stood before everyone and offered a simple reflection. Many people spend their lives waiting for extraordinary miracles, the elder said gently. Yet some of the greatest miracles are happening every day. A hardened heart learns forgiveness. A fearful heart discovers courage. A lonely person finds friendship. A discouraged soul chooses hope again. These quiet miracles often change the world more deeply than dramatic events ever could. Those words settled into every heart present. Many recognized that they had already witnessed those very miracles within themselves. Later that evening, the two whose journeys had quietly paralleled one another found themselves walking along a peaceful path beneath countless stars. The silence between them felt comfortable, filled not with uncertainty but with gratitude. One softly admitted, "When I first prayed, I thought I was asking for a different future." The other smiled gently before replying, "Perhaps the future changed because the people living it changed first." They both paused to reflect upon those words. Looking back, they realized that every unanswered question had encouraged greater trust. Every delay had strengthened patience. Every disappointment had quietly prepared them to appreciate blessings they might otherwise have overlooked. As they continued walking, they spoke about the importance of family, the value of honest friendships, and the quiet joy found in serving others without expecting recognition. They no longer measured success by circumstances alone. They measured it by the peace they carried within, the encouragement they offered others, and the integrity with which they lived each ordinary day. That quiet perspective brought freedom unlike anything they had experienced before. Listen carefully, my beloved child, because this fictional story now reveals one of its deepest truths. In this story, what they experienced as God's answer reminded them that every sincere prayer has the potential to change the person who prays. A grateful heart notices opportunities others overlook. A compassionate spirit becomes a source of hope wherever it goes. A faithful life quietly strengthens families, friendships, and communities through ordinary acts of kindness repeated day after day. Those small decisions become the strongest foundation upon which lasting peace is built. As dawn slowly painted the horizon with warm golden light, both welcomed another beautiful morning with thankful hearts. They no longer searched for certainty before choosing joy. They simply embraced every new day as another opportunity to encourage someone, strengthen a relationship, offer forgiveness, and continue becoming people whose lives reflected humility, wisdom, compassion, and enduring hope. They understood that the answer to yesterday's prayer had never stopped unfolding. It continued revealing itself through every kind word, every faithful action, and every heart willing to love generously despite life's uncertainties. My beloved child, don't skip these closing words, because the final chapter of this fictional journey will reveal how one unforgettable sunrise brings together families, friendships, and hearts in a celebration of gratitude, reminding us that the greatest answers are often revealed not through sudden certainty but through lives transformed by faith, truth, humility, compassion, and unwavering hope. My beloved child, don't skip this chapter, because in this fictional story, the quiet answer that first began in prayer is now unfolding through moments neither person expected. Listen carefully, because some of life's greatest blessings arrive so gently that they are almost overlooked. They do not force their way into our lives. Instead, they quietly reveal themselves through faithful choices, patient hearts, and opportunities to become more loving than we were yesterday. This is not a prediction about your life or your future. It is a fictional story about faith, perseverance, gratitude, and the beautiful transformation that takes place when people continue trusting through uncertain seasons. The weeks continued passing, and the rhythm of everyday life remained beautifully ordinary. The morning sun rose faithfully across the horizon, families gathered around breakfast tables, neighbors exchanged warm greetings, and children filled the streets with cheerful laughter. Outwardly, nothing seemed extraordinary. Yet beneath those familiar routines, both people could sense that something inside them had changed forever. The anxiety that once filled every quiet moment had gradually been replaced with steady confidence. They no longer rushed ahead searching for immediate answers. Instead, they discovered joy in serving others, appreciating simple blessings, and becoming more grateful for each new day they were given. One Saturday morning, the community organized another volunteer project to restore an old neighborhood library that had served families for generations. People of every age arrived eager to help. Some painted walls, others repaired shelves, while children carefully arranged donated books that would soon inspire countless young readers. Throughout the day, everyone worked side by side with cheerful hearts. Watching the community come together reminded both of them that meaningful things are rarely built overnight. Every brushstroke, every repaired shelf, and every carefully placed book became another reminder that lasting beauty is created through faithful effort repeated over time. In this fictional story, what they experienced as God's answer was not a dramatic sign descending from the heavens. It was the quiet invitation to continue building lives marked by generosity, humility, patience, and hope. My beloved child, don't skip this part, because the emotional heart of this fictional story unfolds here. During a short break, both found themselves sitting quietly on the library steps while watching children excitedly carry books to newly organized shelves. One child stopped nearby, holding an old storybook with a worn cover. Looking up with innocent curiosity, the child smiled and asked, "Why do people fix old things instead of buying new ones?" The question brought gentle smiles to both faces. After a thoughtful pause, one softly answered, "Because some things become even more valuable after they've been cared for." Time doesn't always weaken what matters most. Sometimes it teaches us how precious it truly is. The child nodded happily before running back inside, but the simple conversation remained with them long after the moment had passed. They realized the lesson applied not only to books but also to hearts, friendships, families, and every relationship built through forgiveness and faithful love. As evening settled over the town, volunteers gathered together to celebrate everything they had accomplished. Looking around the beautifully restored library, they recognized that every small contribution had mattered. No single person had completed the work alone. Every helping hand had become part of something greater than itself. Reflecting upon the journey of the past year, both quietly realized that their own lives had followed a similar path. Every difficult season had strengthened resilience. Every unanswered prayer had deepened trust. Every disappointment had prepared them to value kindness more deeply than ever before. What once felt like waiting had quietly become preparation. Later that evening, they walked home beneath a sky filled with brilliant stars. Neither hurried the conversation. Peace had taught them that silence shared between trusted friends no longer needed to be filled with endless words. Finally, one looked toward the night sky and gently said, "When I first prayed, I thought I was asking God to change my future." The other smiled warmly before replying, "Perhaps the greatest answer was learning how to live faithfully in the present." Once our hearts changed, the future slowly began changing with us. Those words settled gently into the quiet evening, bringing gratitude instead of uncertainty. Listen carefully, my beloved child, because this fictional story now reveals one of its greatest truths. Sometimes what people experience as God's answer unfolds through transformed priorities rather than immediate circumstances. A grateful heart begins recognizing blessings that fear once overlooked. A compassionate spirit becomes a source of encouragement for others. Honest conversations rebuild trust. Forgiveness restores peace. Daily acts of kindness become quiet miracles that influence families, friendships, and entire communities. Those are the answers that continue unfolding long after a single prayer has been spoken. As dawn welcomed another beautiful morning, both stepped into the new day carrying hearts no longer burdened by yesterday's worries. They understood that every sunrise offered another opportunity to encourage someone, strengthen a friendship, serve their community, and reflect the quiet values that had reshaped their lives. Whatever tomorrow would bring, they no longer feared the unknown. They trusted that every faithful step taken with humility, compassion, integrity, and hope would continue revealing the beautiful story that had been quietly unfolding all along. My beloved child, don't skip these closing words, because the final chapter of this fictional journey will reveal how a joyful family gathering becomes a celebration of gratitude, restored trust, and enduring hope, reminding us that the most meaningful answers often unfold not through extraordinary events alone, but through hearts transformed by faith, kindness, truth, and unwavering love. My beloved child, don't skip this chapter, because in this fictional story, the answer that once seemed hidden is now becoming visible through countless ordinary moments. Listen carefully, because life often reveals its greatest blessings slowly. They appear through faithful choices, quiet acts of love, and hearts that continue trusting even when every answer has not yet arrived. This is not a prediction about your life or your future. It is a fictional story about faith, gratitude, perseverance, and discovering that God's guidance is often reflected in the way people choose to love, forgive, and serve one another. The morning arrived with gentle sunlight stretching across the hills, filling the town with warmth and new energy. Families opened their windows to the songs of birds, children prepared for another day of school, and neighbors greeted one another with cheerful smiles. Everything appeared beautifully ordinary, yet both people sensed a quiet joy they had never experienced before. They no longer measured each day by what was missing. Instead, they found themselves giving thanks for simple blessings that had once gone unnoticed. A shared meal with family, an encouraging conversation with a friend, the opportunity to help someone in need, each ordinary moment had become a reminder that peace grows wherever gratitude is practiced. As the day continued, preparations began for a family celebration honoring several generations who had lived in the community for many years. Relatives traveled from distant places, old family photographs were carefully displayed, and stories from the past were shared around long tables decorated with flowers and candles. Laughter echoed throughout the home as children listened with fascination to memories from grandparents who had witnessed decades of change. The atmosphere was filled with warmth, not because every family had lived without hardship, but because they had learned the importance of remaining united through every season of life. In this fictional story, what they experienced as God's answer was not creating a life free from challenges. It was gently reminding them that love, forgiveness, and faith become stronger whenever they are practiced together. My beloved child, don't skip this part, because the emotional heart of this fictional story unfolds here. During the evening meal, one elderly family member quietly stood and held up an old photograph taken many years earlier. Smiling with gratitude, they said, when this picture was taken, many of us believed life would never become easier. We faced uncertainty, disappointment, and questions we could not answer. Yet looking around tonight, I realized something beautiful. The greatest blessing was not that every problem disappeared. The greatest blessing was that those difficult seasons taught us how to love one another more deeply. The room fell silent as everyone reflected upon those gentle words. Looking around, many recognized that their own greatest lessons had also been learned during life's hardest chapters. Later that evening, after the celebration had ended, both walked together beneath a sky illuminated by countless stars. They passed through the same quiet streets they had walked many times before, yet everything felt different. The fears that had once occupied their thoughts had quietly lost their power. One looked toward the peaceful horizon and softly admitted, "I spent so much time praying for life to change that I almost missed how much my own heart had changed." The other smiled with quiet understanding before replying, "Perhaps that was the answer unfolding all along. We were becoming the people we had been praying to become." Those words remained with them as they continued walking through the peaceful night. The following weeks brought many opportunities to live according to those lessons. They strengthened family relationships through patient conversations. They encouraged neighbors facing difficult seasons. They volunteered together whenever help was needed. They apologized quickly when misunderstandings occurred and forgave generously whenever others fell short. Slowly, they discovered that peace does not remain confined within one heart. It naturally spreads into every relationship touched by humility, honesty, and compassion. Their lives became quiet reminders that faithful love is demonstrated not through extraordinary speeches but through ordinary faithfulness lived every day. Listen carefully, my beloved child, because this fictional story now reveals one of its deepest truths. In this story, what they experienced as God's answer reminded them that every sincere prayer has the power to shape character long before it changes circumstances. A humble heart begins recognizing opportunities to encourage others. A grateful spirit discovers joy within ordinary days. A forgiving soul creates room for healing where resentment once lived. Those quiet transformations become lasting blessings that continue influencing families, friendships, and communities long after a single prayer has been spoken. As another sunrise painted the sky with radiant shades of gold, blue, and soft crimson, both welcomed the new day with thankful hearts. They no longer feared tomorrow because they had learned to trust the values guiding them today. Every conversation became an opportunity to speak with kindness. Every challenge became another invitation to practice patience. Every ordinary moment became another chance to reflect integrity, compassion, humility, and enduring hope. My beloved child, don't skip these closing words, because the final chapter of this fictional journey will reveal how one unforgettable sunrise becomes a celebration of gratitude, restored relationships, and peaceful hearts, reminding us that the most beautiful answers to prayer often unfold through lives transformed by faith, truth, kindness, forgiveness, and unwavering hope. The answer that was quietly unfolding. My beloved child, don't skip these final words, because every chapter of this fictional story has been leading to this peaceful conclusion. Listen carefully, because the greatest answer in this journey was never about one extraordinary moment that changed everything overnight. It was about two hearts learning to live with greater faith, deeper compassion, and lasting hope. This is not a prediction about your life or your future. It is a fictional story about forgiveness, humility, perseverance, and discovering that the most meaningful blessings often grow quietly through ordinary days. As the first light of dawn slowly spread across the horizon, the town awakened to another beautiful morning. Birds welcomed the sunrise with joyful songs, families gathered around breakfast tables, and neighbors greeted one another with warm smiles. Life appeared wonderfully ordinary, yet those who had walked through this journey understood that something remarkable had taken place. The greatest miracle had not been the disappearance of every challenge. It had been the transformation of hearts that no longer allowed fear to guide their choices. Where anxiety had once lived, peace had quietly taken its place. Where resentment had once remained, forgiveness had begun to flourish. Later that day, the community gathered once again for a celebration of gratitude. Children laughed as they played together beneath colorful banners, volunteers prepared meals for every guest, and elderly neighbors shared stories filled with wisdom earned through many seasons of life. Looking around, both people recognized faces that had encouraged them during difficult times. Some had offered kind words when hope felt distant. Others had quietly served without expecting recognition. Every relationship had become part of the beautiful answer unfolding throughout the story. In this fictional story, what they experienced as God's answer was not a promise that life would always be easy. It was the gentle reminder that faithful love, humble service, honest conversations, and compassionate hearts can bring light even during uncertain seasons. My beloved child, don't skip this part, because it carries the emotional heart of this fictional story. As the celebration drew to a close, one respected elder invited everyone to pause for a moment of reflection. Looking across the gathered families, the elder smiled gently and said, "Many people spend years searching for a miracle they can see. Yet some of the greatest miracles cannot be measured with our eyes. A heart that learns forgiveness is a miracle. A family restored through honest conversations is a miracle. A friendship strengthened by patience is a miracle. A person who continues choosing kindness after disappointment is a miracle." Those simple words settled into every heart. Silence filled the gathering, not because anyone lacked words, but because everyone recognized pieces of their own journey within that message. As evening approached, the two walked together through the peaceful park where so many important conversations had taken place throughout the story. The same trees stood quietly, the same gentle breeze moved through the leaves, and the same path stretched before them. Yet everything felt different because they had changed. One looked toward the setting sun and quietly said, "When I first prayed, I thought I was asking for a different future." The other smiled warmly before replying, "Perhaps the answer was preparing us to become different people first." Once our hearts changed, we began seeing every new day with gratitude instead of fear. They stood together for a few peaceful moments, thankful not because every question had been answered, but because they had learned to trust the journey that shaped them. Looking back over every chapter, they realized that nothing had been wasted. Every delay had strengthened patience. Every disappointment had deepened compassion. Every misunderstanding had taught the value of honest communication. Every quiet season had prepared them to appreciate simple blessings that once seemed ordinary. They no longer wished to erase the difficult chapters because they finally understood that those very chapters had become the foundation of their wisdom, resilience, and hope. Listen carefully, my beloved child, because this fictional story now reveals its final truth. In this story, what they experienced as God's answer reminded them that the greatest blessing is not found in controlling tomorrow. It is found in becoming people who choose integrity today. Love grows where respect is protected. Trust grows where honesty is practiced. Peace grows where forgiveness is freely given. Hope grows wherever compassion remains stronger than fear. Those quiet choices become a legacy that continues blessing others long after individual moments have passed. As one final sunrise filled the sky with brilliant shades of gold, blue, and soft crimson, both welcomed the new day with grateful hearts. They no longer searched for extraordinary signs before believing that life held purpose. Every ordinary sunrise became a reminder that each new day offered another opportunity to love generously, serve faithfully, encourage others, strengthen family, and continue growing in wisdom. Their journey had taught them that the most beautiful answers are often revealed slowly, through countless faithful steps taken with humility and hope. My beloved child, remember these final words as this fictional journey comes to its close. Every season has something to teach. Every act of kindness has lasting value. Every sincere prayer has the power to shape the heart that offers it. Even when the road ahead cannot be fully seen, choosing honesty, compassion, patience, and gratitude creates a future filled with peace. The story did not end because every problem disappeared. It ended because the people within it discovered that true joy is found in becoming people who reflect love through their everyday actions. And so this fictional story reaches its peaceful ending. The prayer that once rose from a heart filled with uncertainty became the beginning of a life shaped by faith, humility, courage, and compassion. Families grew closer, friendships became stronger, and every ordinary day became another opportunity to share hope with others. As the morning light stretched across the path ahead, they walked forward with grateful smiles, carrying wisdom instead of regret, kindness instead of fear, and enduring hope instead of uncertainty. One chapter had come to a close, but a beautiful new beginning was already unfolding, one faithful step, one loving choice, and one sunrise at a time.